Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Saira Ansari. I'm a writer and an editor and a researcher, and I'll be moderating this panel today, which is a mouthful, Body as Medium, Interfaces, Skin, Screen. And I'm joined by our two panelists, Elizabeth Churchill, who is the department chair and professor of human-computer interaction at, as she calls it, MUBS.
I say Muzbaz,
Muzbaz.
but it's MBZ UAI, the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence.
And Dana Dowd, artist and writer. Before we go into introductions for our panelists, thank you so much for joining us. This panel has been brought to you by ADMAF in collaboration with Mohammed bin Zayed University and SeMA. SeMA and ADMAF have collaborated on the exhibition that you've seen. I will want to read a little bit of a few notes that I've taken because this is a subject matter that's quite interesting and we're wanting to take it off a bit beyond the basic conversations around art and artificial intelligence. So our panel today sits at a point of tension and entanglement between the physical and the virtual, between presence and projection, between skin and screen. We're here to think about how our bodies, gestures, and emotions are increasingly mediated and how they move across surface interfaces and systems. And there's different ways to kind of approach this. This could be personal, artistic, political, and that is what we're going to try and kind of take apart in this conversation. And our two speakers, whose practices really couldn't be more different. Elizabeth's work explores human interaction with technologies and how systems are shaped by behavior and design. And Dana works with film and sound work and captures the mood and the texture and the fragmentation of digital life in a very poetic sense. So I do want to start by doing a quick intro of Elizabeth. Professor Churchill is an applied social scientist, interactive technology designer, and social communications researcher. She has a background in psychology, and in parentheses, that's neuro, experimental, cognitive, and social. It's a lot. AI and cognitive science. One of the lines that she wrote in her bio was that she loves and has been fascinated by her species and by concepts of intelligence. Both species and intelligence are in quotations, and which I will come to later. And Elizabeth is working at a newly launched 5-year-old university, which is MBZ, and the program is focused on AI. There she is actively hiring, if anyone's listening, world-class researchers interested in exploring the new forms of interaction with computation, from brain-computer interfaces to wearable smart devices and fabrics, to interactions with smart digital physical spaces. She believes the humanities and the arts will lead the way in innovation in these spaces. And this is the kind of conversation we were just having before all of you guys came and sat here. I was getting to know Elizabeth. I hadn't met her before. So I think what you were telling me, and I want our audience to kind of get into that, is talk to us a bit about what you're developing at MBZ and what has been achieved perhaps in the last few years and how much of that is actually relevant anymore.
Yeah, so the university is about 5 years old, and it's been very focused on the technical aspects of AI, from machine learning to natural language processing to computer vision, et cetera. And the university has been extremely successful. And one of the things that I always like to say is that the leadership of this place, the UAE and Abu Dhabi in particular, is extremely prescient. They started the AI university focused on masters and PhDs before AI became the big trendy thing that it is now. And one of the other things that I think the university has been very prescient about, and especially our president, Eric Jing, is he wanted to create a department of human computer or human computation interaction, to bring this idea of why are we building these things, how do we build them better, for whom are we building them, and how do we evaluate them. And so the department I'm setting up, which hopefully will have its first cohort of students starting next year, next academic year, is really looking at what I call 3 things. How do you design AI? Understanding the technologists who build the AI systems and the tools that they use and how they evaluate those tools. designing with AI, which is everything from that smart watch, smartphone, smart home. I was just back in San Francisco and I was having to have an app-based conversation with my intelligent dishwasher. That was interesting. All the way through to things like financial services and all of the other ways in which we encounter AI. And the final thing I'm thinking of in terms of hiring is what I call designing for AI. So imagine you are all in there in the chatbot and you are desperately saying, "Dear human, I do not know what you mean. It's not just going to be prompt engineering, it's going to be gesture and everything else." So that's the sort of remit that I have at this relatively new but quite successful university. And the department, which is looking at human aspects, is very much a horizontal across all of the other departments to really integrate human-centered thinking from incept to evaluation, from ideation to exploration and hopefully success. So I'm delighted to be here. I've been part of the university for about a year, and hopefully by next year we will be launching a number of PhD and master's programs and students into the world in collaboration. And I guess I've got this slide up here. Do you want me to go through why? Okay, so these are some sort of thoughts of how I think about AI. On this side, I asked an AI agent to tell me what copacetic human AI intelligence would look like. And as you can see, the images are not so awesome, frankly. Not awesome. We're not there yet. The other way I like to think about AI is based very much in the work of the philosopher Donna Haraway. Has anybody in the audience heard of Donna Haraway? Great. Well, Donna Haraway really thinks about, our relationship to other species, our relationship to ourselves, and moves beyond this idea of the skin encapsulated human that has all control, the human-centric. Really tries to think of nature and how we are companions to each other and to the species. And she focuses in particular in this on dogs. How many people in the audience have dogs? A few of you. We don't control the dogs, we co-evolve with them. We are mutually understanding. We live in the world together, we share knowledge of the world together, and we co-inhabit and mutually co-construct. And I like to think of AI in that way, which is, what is the companion species? What is the companionship in a robot? What does it look like to co-evolve? And that is where the blurring of the digital and the physical really comes in. We're already blurring the digital and physical. Back to my watch. We're already thinking about embodiment, which is augmented in really interesting ways. So I like to sort of think of AI as a companion species. And what does that look like? A cyborg manifesto was something that I read when I was much younger, which really inspired me. And it's a feminist manifesto, similarly, looking at what is the cyborg and using the concept of the cyborg to reflect on ourselves and our political decisions about what we choose to do and what we choose to build and who we choose to be. And so Donna Haraway is at the center of how I like to think about AI and technologies in general. Over here is one of my favorite installations. It's by a group called Blast Theory in collaboration with scholars at Nottingham University in the UK. And if you get a chance, please look up Cat Royale, because if I've gone from dogs, we all know the internet started with cats, right? Everybody knows that. Cat Royale is this fantastic installation where there's a robot in the middle of this cornucopia of delights, a theme park. Here we are in Abu Dhabi with many theme parks. This is a theme park for cats. And the robot learns how to play games like throw balls and so forth for the cats. And with the cats who inhabit this space, the robot learns their behaviors, their patterns, and which games they like. And mutually, they adapt to each other. So I check out Cat Royale. Again, this digital, physical, but not just us as humans, but the other creatures we inhabit the world and we love together. How does the robot fit in with us? And then over here we have, again, more dogs. I love dogs. And some friends of mine are part of the canine companions. How many people here have spent some time with an assistive dog, a canine companion? I really recommend that you do. People who have low vision, for example, people who have physical differences, people of determination, we have these companions that really learn and take care of us if we train them well and we co-train each other. This is Steve Cousins, who is the director of the Stanford Robotics Institute, and I was just there last week. And what I love about this is that this is a room where they are building robots to assist people. And especially as we are all aging and the population is aging, we know that we need more and more of this kind of assistance. When you ask people what do they want from a robot, they're like, do my washing up. Back to the dishwasher, we already have that. Actually, we want robots to do something else for us, maybe assist us getting out of bed as we age, for example. Back to the canine companions. What does that copacetic living, that copacetic emergence look like, and how are we going to build it in the right way? And I think finally, the last image was AI generated, but where we see this copacetic emergence happening in a very real sense is in just one example of many, with surgeons who are using technology to do surgery and have, if you want, their hands and their eyes extended to have more arms to be able to actually do surgeries very effectively, more limbs, more ability. And I just want you all to think about all of the other ways in which that augmentation is occurring. So back to the university, the folks I work with, my colleagues, are geniuses at the underlying infrastructure and building the potential. And my job and my passion is to think about how that potential can be used effectively and to turn the word infrastructure, technology infrastructure, into a verb of infrastructuring with things that we meaningfully want to build, the blurring of the digital and the physical, the blurring of the different intelligences that are being brought to bear from the different AIs and from our different intelligences.
Thank you so much. There's quite a few terms that I will bring up later on, including blurring that we're going to be talking to Dana later on. And at this point, I want to introduce Dana. Dana is an artist and writer exploring fragmented identity, mysticism, and digital culture through film, montage, and sound. She's the founder of Open Secret, a touring screening series that reimagines internet cinema as a porous, evolving form, and Pleasure Helmet, a sound project archiving experimental works and niche internet cultures. Her own ongoing project, Monad, blurs the face as both method and motif, weaving together online networks, urban landscapes, and speculative mythologies. We've heard Elizabeth talk about what she's doing. I think it would be nice to kind of present a bit of your artwork to the audience for them to understand about your practice, but also perhaps talking about a few things that Elizabeth has brought up about the idea of this human entanglement and intuition. And then perhaps I think if you could, there's a couple of images that she's going to go through, lead up to how you arrived at internet cinema as a term and as a form, and how does that open up for you in terms of formats that other labels don't?
Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you Elizabeth for introducing your fantastic work. I really related to what you were saying about the way we think about species and like AI, interestingly, as a companion and technology as a companion. And I think it's interesting that this image is being shown now. This is one of the Open Secret screenings that happened. This was this month in Brussels. So I'm running this screening that is called Open Secret that has been happening everywhere, all over the world since 2004. Every month we have like multiple screenings all over the world. And we show what we're calling internet cinema, or what others are calling internet cinema. Just to like, maybe make a definition of what internet cinema is, which is very difficult because many people have different definitions for it. But in simple terms, for people who haven't heard of it, it's just literally like the media, images, and languages that we have been consuming for years, that have been naturalized into everyday life, is now being made into films. And these have been like, they're being shown in the space of cinema, where you just like sit without your phone and you contemplate and you think through these images. And I find this image powerful because of the fire here. And if we think about like Bernard Stiegler's thinking about technology and Prometheus, how, okay, Prometheus was like, he had all of these gifts that he gave all species, all animals, but then he had nothing to give to humans. So he ended up giving them fire, and fire became this technology. It's like this foreign prosthetic thing that we use to aid us as humans. And we always have this like very tense relationship with technology. We don't know what to do with it, but at the same time, it's really helping us advance, and we always like think of it as something dangerous, like fire, like it could hurt us, but at the same time, it's something that gives us so much power and advances us. So yeah, most of the films that we show in the screening deal with these themes as well. What the internet means, how the integration of internet in our daily lives, and the images that we see, and the languages, and all of the different ideas that emerge, the cultural memes, everything, like all of the ideas that have been, you know, every day they're accelerating. How do these affect us? I think like this is what my current project is doing, Open Secret. And in my own practice, I also make film, and I've been making this series called Monad, in which I'm not an institutional artist. I didn't like I'm not an academic person. I'm like a para-academic, like autodidact type person. And my whole practice for years has been internet-based, and I think through Open Secret, I found a lot of people who are the same. So they're not necessarily going through like the usual normal path in becoming artists. We can find parallels in this with, for example, CCRU, like academics going on blogs and writing essays, speculative thought, all of these things. And I think that's the direction I'm going for with my work. And I think that's how, for example, thinking about AI could become different, because like, if you deal with it in an unconventional way, you can actually take it to creative paths. Like AI is rendering most like basic tasks obsolete, right? But now that gives us the space to think creatively about things. So yeah, I don't know. I lost.
No, that's fine. Do you want to go through any of the other? I think what
I want to talk about internet cinema, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and also maybe perhaps core
Yeah.
or post-core. There's a lot of people who might not be familiar with this very, very subculture, or maybe the younger
Yeah.
people are, because they're nodding. I didn't,
Yeah.
but this subculture in on the internet where these people who exist in little niches and are producing work.
Yeah, so if anyone's like using TikTok, I don't know if you've like in the early 2020s, there were like these like montages of different found footage online that has like this affective quality, and it was called core. And the point of it is just like to end all cores. Like we have cottagecore, we have like different kind of cores, and like core is like the end of all cores, basically. And in 2023, like a lot of people have been like thinking about these things and making like a lot of internet footage, found footage type montages. I was asked to produce something for a symposium called Core in New York by a thinker called Auntie. And then I made a core film called Core, which, you know, it was like November 2023. So all the images that we've been seeing was of Palestinians, violent images. And my thought was just like to make an archival internet film of Palestinian life that was far from that violence. Like, I want to dignify the Palestinian image, and I made a film called Parkour, and it was part of that. And we made, Becoming Press published a book at the same time called Korkor and the Avant-Garde, which also thinks through the internet and the internet images and Korkor and what does it mean to make art now in digital life. And that was like just like connecting all of these like different people from all the world who are like thinking through these themes. And I think the answer is like there's no fixed definition of it. It's still like it's still growing. And even internet cinema itself, like the first article that was written about internet cinema was like in 2007. When the internet emerged, like people were trying to think, okay, what's going to happen now to the image, and since we have the internet. And I think with Open Secret now we can see that attention spans have changed. The way we look at images have changed. The way we receive and think about things have changed. So cinema will change, like, or have changed already. And yeah, like this is what we're trying to show to people, like that the way we relate to images, the way we relate to language has changed, so cinema will change as well. So that's what internet cinema opens up. It also opens up the space for a cinema without a camera, because now you can just like collect footage and then edit, and like the primacy of editing becomes more important than you know, making videos. And this comes also to AI now. Like AI has advanced so far now that we know that it will replace, for example, like commercials, maybe modeling, so many other things. And it just begs the question, where does the human emerge from that? Like if we look at the work of John Raffman, for instance, even though he uses a lot of AI slop and his main focus is AI, there's still something human that emerges with the narratives and all of that. So yeah, it's just like really interesting and exciting time to be actually.
Do you think that also kind of leans into your sound archiving work, and how much is about this kind of dichotomy that you're talking about?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the films as well in Open Secret rely on sound, and they have this ambient quality. Like when you just see images without like a clear narrative, when it's like more fragmented, it feels like you're on SoundCloud listening to some mix. So yeah, like in 2020, I started a podcast called Pleasure Helmet, and I was just like finding these like very niche, weird accounts online, because I was in that space already. Like people who are like philosophers or just people who don't have actually a platform, and I would just like bring them in, and we would talk about art and talk about so many things. And yeah, like someone like in Malaysia would be listening to my podcast and then message me, and it's just like a networking thing. And this is the same way that Open Secret is operating right now. Like, I don't go and ask spaces to show it. People message the page, and they say, I want to host this in my city. So far we've shown in Tehran 5 times, we've shown in Bangladesh, we've shown in Tokyo, we've shown in New York so many times, London, Dubai 1 time. And it's just like so exciting, because most of these events, like young students come after and they're like, oh, I've been making a film on my phone, like I actually can show this now. I'm like, yeah, you can, because like it actually is valid and it is important and it is your way of expressing yourself. And yeah, I just think it's really, yeah.
That's quite fantastic. And I think, Elizabeth, I wonder how this resonates from your side, especially with someone who's designing or thinking through systems, when you hear about these emotional or chaotic or very deeply human forms like Korkor. How do you think about system design in response to this kind of complexity?
Well, I think you're bringing up emotion, which is really important, because we are fundamentally emotional beings. And so, you know, everybody sort of thinks about, you know, AI as being logical, rational, you know, but actually AI, a lot of the AI that we see is based on the content that we've already produced, which has an emotion embedded within it. And it is therefore reflecting some of the emotionality of us as humans anyway. And that's where some of the good and bad biases come in anyway. But I think all of these fundamentally humans, we want to connect with each other. Even when we're fighting, we're connecting in some way. And these are fundamentally emotional reactions. So when I think about system and infrastructure design, I think about everything from the super tactical of, for example, is there something AI can do to mediate when we are being emotional with each other, to recognize emotionality and mediate some of that? Is there, we know that the filter bubbles cause people to fight. Is there something that an AI agent could do to mediate and to have different perspectives presented? That's a very mundane and tactical approach. But, how does AI engage with us and our emotions? I was talking about robots a little bit earlier. We know that companion species and companion robots is something that in many parts of the world, like Japan, have been very, very important. So how does a robot engage with us emotionally, and how do we engage with it? And what is its theory of mind? Does it have one or does it not? And does it matter? Those are interesting things to me. You bring up something that's about, the global nature of the work that you've been doing. How does emotion get expressed globally in different ways? What are the different cultural dynamics of emotion? I've been working with a couple of folks at the university who are very interested in the fact that most large language models are based on English. There are a number of other languages that are highly low-resourced. And one of the questions we're asking is, if we start to get data from those other languages, how are emotions reflected differently, and what are the cultural norms that will emerge?
I was just thinking that, do you conflate then emotions with intelligence, and in this sense, learned intelligence or taught intelligence?
Yeah, it's interesting. So if we go back to my problem with the word intelligence, as humans, our limbic system is sort of primary, and our frontal cortex is secondary in terms of development. And we all think we're so logical. And has anybody in this audience ever felt like you did something that seemed logical and then you reflected later, you thought, that was a bit emotional, wasn't it, really? That's why we always say to everybody, make sure before you do something important, before you hit the keyboard, get a good night's sleep and don't drink a glass of wine. We are very emotional. And the question then becomes, with AI, how does AI experience, express, reflect back to us what are the things that are emotional in all of the data that are being gathered? But I actually think what you're doing, which is the sort of global engagement, is really important. Because imagine a world, okay, I'm an experimentalist by background, imagine a world where we see what all of these fantastic artists are creating, and we see how they view maybe the same event through different lenses with different emotionality attached. That becomes a thing for us to discuss. It becomes a conversation, not an end in itself. And I think back to AI, a lot of what AI produces is it's a conversational artifact, not an end in itself. You mentioned about mundane tasks going away. Well, some of those mundane tasks are going away, but in some situations, does anybody ever felt like you're doing all of the work and the AI is having the fun? That is what we're trying to address and deal with, and I think what you're doing right now is really asking that question. The production of the visual experience, the narrative experience, where are people having the fun? And how is AI assisting them, not the other way around?
Can I lead into this term that you mentioned, which is copacetic emergence? And I'm very much speaking out of field here because this is not my area. If you can talk a little bit about that, but it's something unexpected and meaningful that could arise between this interaction between humans and AI, and I think that's what we're talking about. And the question just beautifully plays in. What is copacetic emergence? And I'm wondering if it's not something pre-programmed, but something that kind of unfolds in space. Are we getting closer to this dynamic? Are there examples that you can perhaps share?
So I made the term copacetic emergence up.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, you're not going to find it. Well, maybe you will. I don't know.
You heard it here.
You heard it here. You will now. So, you know, the idea of being copacetic is something, it's in tandem with, it's in conjunction with, it's copacetic to me, and we experience other people as copacetic if they respond to us. You know, when you talk to somebody, you don't just send a message. Two people having a conversation are emerging together and understanding. And if anybody in this audience is contrarian, you know, if you feel you've been in a conversation with somebody and you just suddenly change in a different direction, you watch how people scramble, you will understand that we co-construct understanding. Talking is not sending information. A conversation is a co-construction. There's a microsociologist who did these fantastic things called breach experiments, which is where he would have his students, for example, go home and treat their parents or whoever they were living with like they were in a B&B, you know, a bed and breakfast. He would have people queue in supermarkets and basically break the agreed upon protocol of what a queue is, breaching the social understanding and the protocol. So we are always emerging with each other. And we've all had that experience of an AI or some kind of, computational technology, like avatars, where you think you're talking to a human and then there's a breach. And you got what it's called the uncanny valley. Has everybody heard about the uncanny valley? That moment where you go, wait a minute, you're not a human. And now that's been going on since the first, essentially, chatbot exchange, which was Eliza, you know, back in the 60s, 70s? It was a long time ago. But, you know, that uncanny, that moment of the uncanny. And I would say that copacetic emergence is where that doesn't really happen. I showed the image, which was AI generated, of the surgeon with, you know, the robot. And that emergence is the surgeon understanding through various forms of feedback what the robot is doing, and then applying some kind of pressure or tension to change the direction of what the robot is doing in microsurgery. That is, you know, really amazing thing. That's, I would call it copacetic emergence. Where have I seen this? I mean, I've seen it. How many people have been to improvisational dance? Right? What's happening there is that you've got two humans improvising to create something in a context that might be musical, on a platform that might be a stage, or it could be something like this. And there are so many performances now with human-robot dancing, where the robot is sensing where you're going with computer vision, etc., and then moving around. And I think those things, for me, are copacetic and they're emergent. And the question then becomes, you know, how does that concept play out in something mundane, like when I'm trying to get a hold of my bank to figure something out and I've got a chatbot that doesn't understand, I'm really frustrated, and isn't learning about why I'm frustrated.
Try talking to chatbots with my accent. They just have no idea what
absolutely.
I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to like turn the tables a little bit. I think in the art world, this kind of emergence has been looked at very critically. And I want to talk to Dana. And I know there's no right answer. There's no answer that we're looking forward. But how do you approach then this relationship between technology and human? I mean, in your work, it's not clear to me whether the idea of the camera is of a ubiquitous intruder, the channeler of stories, or an extension of like individual storytelling, because you are collaborative, but you're all independent. And I'm thinking of Pal Core, and there's a lot that resists that framework that's been handed down to us, to our acceptance of technology. And perhaps if you can talk about that.
Yeah, I think the main premise behind my work and the work of artists that I'm working with is that technology is not like naturalized now. Like it's not, most sadly, like right now, like most institutions or like art spaces or cultural writers like perceive the internet or technology as this like new thing, while it's like it's been there. It's been there for a while now, and it's part of our everyday expression as artists and like aesthetically, like the way we express ourselves. And I think that's more how we're going with it. It's like, okay, we're not trying to categorize this, we're not trying to label it, we're not trying to trend cast. We're trying to make something new, but from something that is already natural. It's like speech. It's like this language is part of everyday life, the way we see things. Like, for example, in my film, I use the blur as like a visual language. If you've been online, like if you go to Google Earth or Google Streets, like you will see that like a lot of the faces are blurred. Some people blur their houses so they don't get robbed. If you go to like Pinterest, most of like the fashion displays, like they have like blurred faces. So I was like researching actually like something completely different, which is like in the United States, there were some scientists who were trying to prove that gravity is not a thing. Like you can actually go against gravity and levitate. And they were trying to do these experiments. So I just like went on YouTube, and every video of someone who's like pretending to levitate in the video has their face blurred. So I just like created this like whole like sci-fi narrative of like people online going to blurring experts and asking them to blur their faces. And then like I weaved that into like also Simone Weil, who's like also a very like famous on Tumblr and like the internet as a philosopher, surprisingly. And she's like a mystic in a way as well. And she says that like you have to forget your face, your identity, to kind of like transcend yourself. So I was just trying to play with this like new aesthetic language.
It's not necessarily concealing.
No, it could be liberating. It could be, it makes you just like, it's just, you know, being, for example, online, like you have a different handle, you don't have your profile picture, you have your entire aesthetic universe around you, that's your new face. So like in cinema, in the history of cinema, and most like Persona, Bergman, like Derriere, like the face is the important thing, the human face. But now we have different languages and we have different faces, like the face is not the face anymore. Because AI doesn't have a face anymore, we don't have a face anymore, we're like data, we're like so many different things, like that's the new face. So yeah, like I'm trying to like explore this with my work. Definitely.
I mean, it is kind of the antithesis of social media and the face, and what maybe mainstream is. But blurring is inherently like, political, as I see.
Oh, definitely, and it does like you know go away from surveillance or whatever. But I think also if you watch music videos. Like I'm really into the SoundCloud rap scene on SoundCloud, and like all the music videos, the way they actually like music. I have this theory that music videos are more advanced visually than like most video art and most cinema, because like the way these kids like make music videos and the way they express themselves and the way they dress is like always like ahead, and then it gets recycled back into fashion and like commercial and cinema. So yeah, like that's where all of these elements are coming from. And actually, surprisingly, like a lot of the films in Open Secret that I haven't like we didn't like talk to each other, like they also have the blur also incorporated in them, or like hiding the face or putting light on the face. It's just like always, how do we like just not focus on the identity of the face, like just subvert it.
I mean, and there's always other giveaways. There's language, there's dialect, there's clothing. And, you know, one of the things that I was exploring, it's very interesting when we look at what you were pointing to your smartwatch, which is wearable art, or there's videos before TikTok. God, I've never used TikTok. I have to apologize. I tried. I could only find Kim Kardashian, and that is a guilty pleasure of mine. But you've all seen the Paris court things happening if you're into any kind of popular culture, and how Kim Kardashian was robbed because her stories were geotagged to her apartment. And this is something that we may or may not think about all the time. There's so much stuff that we put online. But a few days ago, I went for a run, and I clock it on Strava, but I don't want it to be shared because I still think that's too much to share. But my Instagram profile is open and people know I'm here. So I wonder how you are looking at locative media in the sense of when it's Pokemon Go, it's great fun. When it's GPS, it's great fun. But when it's surveillance, what happens? And so that kind of nervousness, does your program kind of aim to look at this kind of nervous energy that we have now around surveillance?
Well, I think it's interesting because that as a topic has been top of mind for a long time. And, I can go back too many years for research on this. I think what's interesting is that I consider myself a social scientist, and we as social scientists were talking about this as an issue before a lot of the services that we use came out. And the reality is that the business imperative ignored everything that we said. I'll give you a concrete example. There was one particular photo sharing product that I was very interested in researching, and the default was to have all photos public. And I did a bunch of research on that, and I looked at who was taking the action. Who in this audience changes all of your tailoring and or who goes with all of the defaults to start with and then goes like, oh, I'm going to change it. It takes action to change that default from private to public. And the research that we did showed that there were, we did an online scraping to see how many of the images by percentage, by location, were private versus public. And it turned out that, in the States, in the West Coast, people were just uploading everything and it was public. However, the folks that we talked to, we scraped a bunch of data, then we invited people to talk to us in a sort of ethnographic study. And the folks in Scandinavia typically made their pictures private. So I think, and when we followed up, it was interesting to see why. And I thought it was purely privacy, and that was certainly a part of it. But it was also partly the folks that we interviewed in Scandinavia said, well, I don't want to have all of my photos up there in my stream so that my family has to crawl through something that's not curated. And so there was also the curating of self, the respect for other people's attention and privacy. So, in the States, when we interviewed people, they were like, oh, well, it's up there, and if you're looking at my stream, so be it. So to come back to the question specifically, there are cultural norms around the risks people are willing to take. More seriously, though, there are business imperatives that are about scraping the data and not telling us what data is being scraped. And there are now huge movements, which I really approve of, obviously, and at the university, we have some real investment going into responsible AI, which is looking at transparency, looking at interrogability and explainability of not just the AI, but of the services that are using the data and what happens with that data. And I think so there's the cultural norms, there's the being informed, there's the transparency of systems, and then there's the sort of risk assessment that people make about how much they're willing to share or not. And in the moment, very often, I'm sure we've all opened something that says accept all cookie tracking. And I'm like, I've just got to get that flight booked, of course, fine. And so it's profoundly psychological and in the moment. And we do have to start to look at services to make sure that what happens with that data is, thoughtful and careful. But, we're swimming against a lot of other imperatives.
I do want to close with the last question towards you, and we have a lot to talk about, but we do want to open it up to Q&A. But Dana, perhaps could you respond to that and how that comes into your practice? Because what you were saying makes me think about what you're working on.
Yeah, I was yesterday I was just searching again internet cinema, who wrote about it, and I found this thinker from Iran who's been like thinking about it since 2021 and maybe before that, and tracing how like Iranians are taking cinema into their own hands and like making their own films with their phones. And we all know the famous like the Jafar film like he did in his home, where he had to like sneak the USB to Cannes so he can show his film. So I feel like this like new opening that, okay, now we can make internet cinema, like opens up the possibilities for people to also like this subvert surveillance and like control and systems of control and distribution, where you can actually just like make your vision and just like show people what you want to show them without having to be, you know, afraid. And, you know, we live in a world where we have, you know, the most atrocious thing happening in the world right now is being documented with phones. These are the journalists who are on the ground doing all that work. No other journalists are going there to document it in the conventional forms. They're doing it on their phones. So yeah, we have like we have limitations, we have constraints, we have problems, but we also have like so many ways to hack through those and just like open things up. So yeah, that's like, I guess, my answer.
Thank you.
I really love that you brought that up, because what you asked was something about, you know, what is the personal risk to us as individuals? And what I love is that the other side of that is, how do we collectively represent what is at risk? And how do we have the filmmakers potentially be protected while they represent what is at risk? Because the terrible thing about fear of personal risk is that we stop speaking and we stop sharing where that risk affects us. And to be able to talk about that while being protected is really critical. So I love that you brought that up, because I think it's the yin and the yang, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, maybe we can open it up to questions. Don't feel shy. There's lots to talk about. There's wonderful people here to answer your questions.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. This is fascinating. I think I'm very much on the outside of all of what was said tonight, but my question is, following on from what we have said, you have said just now, is not only copyright, but the risk of what you have written, or what you have published, or what can be caught from, you know, what's sort of suddenly hacked into, who knows? And then for all of this to be misconstrued and to be just parts of snippets of things that were meant to be quite logical, hang together for some reason, and then it is all wrenched apart because it fits into this chat and that chat and the other chat and so on. How should one actually feel about that in the future? Thank you.
Well, I think that's it's a good question. So I'm going to say a couple of things. One is that people are surprisingly good, once you train them a little bit, on seeing where something has been ripped out or taken out of context. There's all these experiments that have been done, which I think are fascinating, which is where you show people content that was generated by an LLM with no human oversight, and you show people stuff that was written by a person, and you show people something that was, you know, written by a person with the support of an LLM. For example, fact checkers do this all the time. And humans are surprisingly good at figuring out when something is not logical and has been, you know, sort of dog fooded from multiple places and positioned, you know, as this sort of this real content. But they're only good once you've exposed them to find what the markers are. And I think that is really important. Another part of the innovation around this is that increasingly content that is produced is being watermarked, and its derivation is being represented. So, you know, how did this come about? And that turns out to be not only good for copyright issues. I mean, I have a whole other rant on copyright that we can talk about at some other point, about the business models around what is copyright and what is not, no ownership of content. But I think that we are moving into a world where the technical innovation around derivation is getting better. Now that's good for human reasoning. And you know, I did studies with folks who were essentially fact checkers years and years and years ago before we had all of these tools. But you know, one of the things they loved was any tool that allowed them to, for example, get a series of documents, and then anything that was cited in that document was summarized on the side. Because then you're starting to see that an argument has been made, and this is why. And it itself has been fact-checked. Its provenance has been checked. So that's really good for human reasoning. But I think your point is very good, because we are at the beginning of that. And we are by no means there. And there are a lot of people who unfortunately haven't had the experiences or support to understand how to unpack, you know, the veracity of something and to recognize it as, you know, a bunch of fragmented stuff put together into a mishmash. But we are at the beginning, but people are looking at that, yeah.
I mean, the copyright law scape right now is the Wild West, really. I was in New York in January for a publishing workshop, and all of the big publishing houses were there. We have Big Five in publishing, like you have Big Five in you know, finance. And a lot of them are fighting cases in courts right now on what LLM, being large language models, how much material can they access, what do they have, how do they use it. You know, Hollywood, you see this happening. So on the creative side, it's still kind of being worked out. I don't know what is happening in the Gulf, really, because these are laws that are being set into motion as we speak. But I feel like the protections might come a little too late. A lot has been absorbed beforehand, but awareness, and if you are a published writer or an author or a filmmaker and you work with agencies, these conversations are super essential wherever you are in the world, whether you're in the Gulf or you're anywhere else in the world. Do we have another question? Or comment. You don't have to ask a question. If you have a comment, oh, there you go.
Thank you for this great talk. I have a lot of thoughts, and they're kind of swirling, and I'm not exactly sure if it's going to lead to a question. But Dana, you were saying about the kind of movements right now in Iran of using the technologies that we have to be able to express and make internet cinema. And it just brings me to thinking about resistance and how that's just such a human thing. I was just reading an article by an amazing philosopher of mind who was saying that that is something that a machine will never be able to do, which is resist this kind of the critical approach that we have as humans towards our environment and our technologies and each other, etc. So I'm just wondering how to kind of ensure that systems or designs are modular enough or kind of imperfect enough to invite this kind of resistance, because it really scares me when technologies start to become more and more slippery and embedded and unnoticeable, and eventually they just become a part of our system, and they're in a sense governing our systems as well. So yeah, the slippery versus chunky and blocky and imperfect, you know, retro future.
I love your question. I just think I was telling you earlier, we're being trained by, we've trained AI for years, and now we're being trained by AI. Or like we can take elements from AI that are actually, can give us like conceptual tactics of resistance, let's say. Because AI actually can go like in a different way, that like we would design it in a way and it would just like surprise us or show us like uncanny things or do things that it's not supposed to do. And I think that we can learn to just see what kind of tactics from AI can help us, and then like we just always have to be one step ahead of AI, I think. We should never just like give in to what it's trying to do with us. We have to like just see how we can use AI for us, and instead of like letting it like, you know, overtake everything. That's what I think. Not stop it as a technology, but that's like the harmony that like Elizabeth is calling for as well. There's actually a manifesto about like harmonization with AI Yudovsky or something, they wrote it. Yeah, it's really interesting because it also talks about the fear-mongering, and there's a lot of fear-mongering when people talk about AI and technology. Like, oh, it's going to kill us all and stuff. No, we always...
Will it? I'm very curious.
No, no, we're going to...
No, we will do it. We will do it, for
we're,
sure.
We're going to do it. It's the humans that are the problem, honestly, seriously. No, but I think, so, you know, there is no such thing as AI. There are just a whole bunch of different techniques, technologies, applications, approaches, etc. It is the for want of a better word, deployment of infrastructures that use certain aspects of AI that are not interrogable and not transparent. That is an opportunity, shall we say. And about resistance, I'll keep talking about my watch. Who uses fitness tracking stuff here? No, I love that you don't, because I resist it all the time. And, you know, oh, I've got a story to tell you. I used to be, when I worked at one of the corporations that I worked at, we had these things which was the number of steps. You know, you'd have a team, and in 1 month you were supposed to do so many steps. It was a fitness drive at work, right? And of course, all of the teams, there were the earnest teams who would all go out like walking, and they were the super fit people, and they would really have the steps. And then there was me, me just jogging up and down, just in my room watching TV. And then there was my friend who resisted by just attaching it to her dog. Back to dogs. So, you know, resistance is everywhere. But I think that your point is very good, because the question is, when things become so integrated into our lives and we co-adapt, do we understand when we should unhook, resist, and change, and move along? And where does that awareness and consciousness come from? And I think it has to come from us sharing and becoming a community of sharing.
Like, I think with Open Secret, like, one of the first definitions that we tried to put was that we're trying to resist the passive scroll of the phone. While, like, when you're like in the cinematic space, like in a cinema, watching with other people, just like engaging with the media, thinking together about it, making films, that's like you're resisting that. Like, you're still engaging with the technology, but you're just like doing it in a different way, where you're resisting this passivity of the society, of the spectacle. You're just like doing something more active with it instead of just like, yeah. So yeah, there's always ways.
Yeah, I think it's a good note to close it on. There's, again, as I expected, I don't think there was going to be any answers here, but conversations. And, you know, whether we're coming from tech or from the art world, a lot of our concerns are very similar. A lot of our aspirations might be different, but they kind of, you know, are looking towards the same direction. And we're hoping that this is not just one conversation, but as Elizabeth wants, there should be many more of these conversations, because there is definitely a disconnect between the audience and the speakers or the masses on how we talk about it. And we really need to go beyond just what it is and move into perhaps policy making and how that affects artists, are we whitewashing it? Governments, are you exploiting it? Academia, are we developing it enough? There's a lot of questions. We're here. You can come and speak to us. I'd like to thank Elizabeth and Dana and the team at ADMAF. Ariana, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for coming and for joining us. And yay.
Thank you.
We can now mingle.